So, for instance, if you need an organ, let's say a kidney or a liver or a heart or something, this is a life-saving procedure. You would normally wait, what would you say, 2-5 years, maybe even more?
If you are wealthy and you have the money to pay, the moment that you pay that money to the broker, okay, in China, that person, the so-called donor, is pre-matched to you in the database already. And you go, and that person is shipped and killed to order. That's why it's called kill to order.
Welcome to the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. I'm sorry, welcome to the Donald J. Trump Kennedy Center of the Performing Arts. Thank you for risking your life coming here this evening during this weather. Can you imagine getting killed in DC, not by gunshot, but by tornado? Wow, that's a tough one to live down. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage journalists Jan Jekielek and Rob Schneider. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out, braving this incredible weather, and wow, that's good. No, thank you for coming out. You never know what you're going to get here, but how about this beautiful Kennedy Center? Boy, I can't wait till they tear it down. It's going to be beautiful. I don't know what the next incarnation is going to be. Tough to beat this 1960s glory. Jan, how did I end up coming here? How did this happen?
How many of you out here are Rob Schneider fans?
You can do it all night long.
So I discovered, I was probably looking at YouTube a little too much, and I came across this video where Rob Schneider was doing a joke, and I kid you not, about forced organ harvesting. Really? Like, this is an issue I've been working on 20 years, and it's been really hard to get it out into the public consciousess. But here's Rob Schneider, clearly not just making a joke, but the joke is great, by the way. But I'm giving it away here.
But putting a lot of pressure on it, Jan.
but he's clearly educating. Like, the point is, like, no one would try to do this, right, without that intent. So I just got fascinated with this guy.
Thank you, Jan. The thing about that joke is, it doesn't murder, it doesn't kill, and that's the vernacular of the stand-up comedian. It's got to kill, it's got to do really, but it doesn't, because people couldn't get behind the fact that it was real. And I'll just tell you the joke, which is, thank you for setting it up in such a pressure way. The death of comedy. You're gonna love this joke. It's simply this, and I went like, China is the only country in the world where it is actually better for your health to smoke and drink an incredible amount. Because it's less likely that the government is gonna harvest your organs. You're like, and because I'm Asian, I can get away with it. No, you don't want my liver. Trust me, it's a mess every day. Oh my goodness, I'm falling apart. You don't. My lungs, forget about it. I can't believe I'm still breathing. I can't believe. And I did that, and it got about the same response. However, and then when Jan and I became friends and became, interested in this horrendous horror show, I actually performed that for people who knew what it was. At the Epoch Times, we did an event, and people really laughed. And I went, okay, then I'm not crazy. There's something behind this. But I will just tell you, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight, because we have the opportunity to understand something that is beyond a normal person's ability to comprehend. Because the rational mind doesn't want us to get to this place that this is actually happening to other human beings because they were born on another side of the world, and because they perform a practice that is an incredible irony, this practice of Falun Gong. Could you explain that to them and your connection to that, which is very special?
Sure. Well, this is I'm going to have to do the short version here.
Yeah.
In a previous life, I was an evolutionary biologist, and I worked in Madagascar. Actually, I studied lemurs, and I worked in the field, worked in a lab, headed back.
I almost did that. I went to Saturday Night Live instead, but I was thinking about that. I was either stand-up comedy, evolutionary biologist. I wasn't sure. And I just said, you know what? This one requires 10 years of education and travel. I'm just going to, perform dirty jokes in comedy clubs. But go ahead.
Well, no, but look, I always thought you were like the character in the movies, So just it's crazy how you can misjudge someone. But anyway, okay.
I think in there's a compliment. We'll have to find it later. If you're an evolutionary biologist, you'll be able to find the compliment in there. If you're not, you'll just see it as a put down. Okay.
But to make
I thought you were a moron, and it turns out I was half right. Okay.
So I got very ill the last time I headed home. I was at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. I'm Canadian, by the way, and we're working hard to be American. That's a part of the project. But no, I just got super ill, and I ended up with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. Okay, it's a really nasty thing where your immune system attacks your nervous system. You can die. You could just end up kind of in rough shape afterwards.
But every day is a terrible pain, and you can't do anything.
Yeah, it basically prevented me from doing my work anymore. And so, I just started looking for alternative therapies, and what came along was there was a guy who had chronic fatigue who I knew from a local coffee shop that basically introduced me through we called them VCDs back there, very grainy DVDs, to this meditation practice. And I didn't know anything about I wasn't thinking about China, I wasn't thinking about any of these things. But basically I started learning it on the computer, and I started feeling a bit better. And within a couple of months, I basically had healed myself. My neurologist told me, "You're in complete remission, congratulations. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That was the message. And I didn't even know what I was doing entirely. And there was a woman, basically there was a little local group of Falun Gong practitioners who were, one of them was a chemistry postdoc, I think, and her mother had escaped from China. This persecution had just started, just as I had gotten ill. I didn't even know. Prior to that year, Falun Gong were considered to be like model citizens in China, basically. Truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, this is what they were practicing.
Truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. That is the creed. So you have, and these are the people that are being systematically murdered. And that's it's such an ironic thing, but that's happening in the most painful way. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I just met, her mother had come, I think it was her mother had come from China, had escaped this, basically, and was telling me about how, all she needed to do to not be tortured, and she had been tortured, was to sign a piece of paper that basically said, I renounce Falun Gong, I'm going to help re-educate, these horrible re-education systems and camps over there, to kind of break people, to get them to become subject to the Communist Party instead of something else that they happen to believe. And at this moment, I just kind of realized, wait a sec. So I don't know how many of you have really kind of had a brush with your own mortality, but for me, right, when I was in the thick of Guillain-Barré or GB, I was basically an agnostic at the time, and I was like, God, if you're up there, just in case, I promised I would give my life to service if things worked out, right? And once this all transpired, I understood after talking to this woman that I had to help these people, right? And then I started learning about what I'd been doing, what was happening in China, and I just got involved in the human rights side of it right away. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that is how this particular time, and that's why I'm so grateful, we're so grateful that you're here this evening, is because there is an awakening that's happening. Because it was really during COVID, and we were talking about this, Jan and I. Can I call you Jan, by the way? Okay. Is that there was an awakening happening during COVID, and thank you for this pillow, because without this I was going to be like this the whole evening. They know, he's a midget, give him a pillow. Was that during COVID, you realize the capture of so much of our society, media, government, our governmental agencies, and our government itself. And you realize that each agency was captured, the media, and you go Hollywood, and it was just this, they were lockstep, and that's when you realize that, you really got to see that behind the green curtain, there really was an Oz there. And so how did that waken you up to for this potential to actually expose this, because this is something hard to believe. I mean, how did you get to the point? This is something you talk about in your book, which is a brilliant book, and it's #1 right now for politics and about China right now. So congratulations.
Thank you.
How did you get to that point to believe this? Because it's an unbelievable thing. The idea that there are people being persecuted and they're being systematically killed. I mean, it does boggle the mind. And how did you get there yourself to believe that this happened? Because this wasn't something that you automatically accepted as factual.
Let me just explain what it is, because there might be people out here who just don't know. So this is a very extreme form of organ trafficking, kind of described as an evil yet to be seen on this planet by one of the early investigators of this, okay? Basically, you need a kind of a state actor, like the Chinese Communist Party in this case. You need to be able to hold the reins of power in such a way that you control the media. You need to be able to push dehumanizing propaganda through an entire population.
Yeah, the way communism will work. Communism doesn't work as, it doesn't work by itself, because it promises utopia, but then the utopia never comes. And when it never comes, they're going to say, we're going to give you land, you're going to get money, you're going to have riches beyond your imaginations, we're going to share everything, and we're going to, and then it never comes, so they have to blame somebody. And they go, we would have had it, except for these people. The landowners are the ones. And then when the landowners all get murdered and all get taken away, they need another enemy, because it still doesn't come. And so these are the people who got identified as the Falun Gong, were the ones, and these people were, am I right about that?
Well, so there's been all these different groups in history of communist China, exactly, right? And so whenever, we have this weird quirk in our psychology, like human beings, we can't do horrible things to our neighbor casually, okay, in general.
There's a process.
But we can be tricked by being convinced that those people are lesser than us. Maybe they're very dangerous, they're causing a big problem in society or something like that. And then we can be sort of tricked into going along with some pretty horrible things. And this dehumanization part is critical. The other part, by the way, you need to be able to incarcerate a huge number of people.
Yeah.
So the Chinese Communist Party can do both of these things. And this is what they did with the Falun Gong. Like the initial, there was this order from Jiang Zemin, the dictator at the time, to eradicate these people. That was the language that was used sort of, kind of behind the scenes. It didn't mean kill everybody, at least not necessarily. It meant put them through this re-education process, brainwash them, break them, right? There's a whole part of the incarceration system that was called re-education through labor camps, if you can imagine. They had perfected this, but the Falun Gong were really resilient to it. So they incarcerated them, okay, in these massive numbers, maybe 1 million, maybe 2, we don't know. And then they started blood typing, tissue typing, and organ scanning them. Some very evil person figured out that there's this priority to, quote unquote, eradicate Falun Gong on one side and an interest in growing their organ industry on the other.
And let me jump in, because what Jan is talking about is an involuntary organ transplantation system that is state-run, and it is kill to order. In other words, the thing that what Jan, when he first explained this to me, because I had a brief understanding of it, or I should say a general understanding. But what Jan, if I may jump in, is that an ordinary organ transplant, and I would just want to jump in, Frank Turek, a very wonderful friend of mine, who I got to meet through Charlie Kirk, he said that what evil is a degradation of something good. So one of the most incredible medical miracles of our lifetime is organ transplantation. It is the life-saving organ transplantation. And the evil degradation of that is to take somebody and murder them on demand and taking their organs. So, for instance, if you need an organ, let's say a kidney or a liver or a heart or something, this is a life-saving procedure, you would normally wait, what would you say, 2, 5 years, maybe even more?
It depends, but there has to be a catastrophic accident for most organs, basically. Like it's usually a car accident or a motorcycle accident, and someone has to be really not coming back. Like there's a team that decides, yes, this person truly isn't coming back, because you don't want to transplant from someone that is coming back, right? There's a whole debate in America about this that we can come back to, and I think the CCP has influenced America in this respect. But basically,
but it is very difficult.
It's very difficult, and you have to match the blood, you have to match the tissue, all this stuff. So it's rare, and it could be a year, it could be months, could be years. But in China, right? This is the unusual thing. Because they have these vitals taken from, say, hundreds of thousands, let's say, of people, or a million people, basically, if you are wealthy and you have the money to pay, the moment that you pay that money to the broker, okay, in China, that person, the so-called donor, is pre-matched to you in the database already, and you go, and that person is shipped and killed to order. That's why it's called Kill to Order. That's the title of the book.
In 2 weeks, something that would maybe take 10 years, 5 years, you die waiting. In 2 weeks, they promised you, and the Chinese government advertised this. They can match you up, and the only way to do that is if you have an inventory.
Prior to 2006, when we first reported on this heavily, there were actual ads, and we have some of them archived online that would talk about this, right? Then, with each subsequent wave of this exposing this, information has been harder to get, but unfortunately, it still continues. We know at scale today.
Well, the Chinese Bible. There's something that I don't know if you've had a curiosity to seeing it, but like for me, I want to hear interesting things and find out stuff that I don't know so that I could make jokes about it, because that's how I continue to keep my habit of eating and sleeping indoors. The Chinese Bible, when it talks about probably Christ's most famous utterance, besides the talk on the mount, is when he goes up to the people about to stone this woman, and he says to them, "Let ye who has not sinned cast the first stone." And in the Chinese Bible, he does the same thing. "Let ye who has not sinned cast the first stone." In the Chinese version, then Jesus stones her himself. That's the Chinese version of it. So I was like, wow, that is something else.
And just to clarify, that's the Chinese Communist Party version. That's the with Chinese characteristics you're talking about.
Yes, yes. So there was a very interesting thing that happened. Now, this stuff is becoming exposed. When it is of this extraordinary thing, and I want to talk about the doctors, and Annie, and then Dr. Levy of the Israeli genius, who was a transplantation genius. But there was a moment that happened that wasn't that long ago. Literally was in 2025, where this hot mic incident happened that went around the world. And it really exposed something that was, that illuminated what the Chinese are doing and what these leaders are doing. And can you just explain that? It's something that's unreal.
Yeah, it was the craziest. So how many of you here remember the hot mic moment between Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un walking into a bar? Okay, bad joke. They were overseeing a military parade. I tried. No, but the most incredible thing was caught on a hot mic. Okay, and I'll paraphrase this. Truncated quite a lot. But she says to Putin, when we're 70, we're just babies, right? And then Putin responds, through continual organ transplantation, maybe we can achieve immortality. Okay, and she says back to Putin, our target is 150 years. Okay, and this, my cell phone was buzzing nonstop that evening when this happened, because everyone knows I'm interested in this issue, right? The organ industry in China. They have this elite longevity project called Project 981, okay? By some estimates, 10 years longer these super elites in China live than the average Chinese, okay? I don't know if that's a real number, but that's one number that's been thrown around.
But there was one leader who died, and in his obituary.
Oh yeah, so this reminded me of, let me clarify this, okay? I had never, with a lot of this stuff, you can't conceive it. Like, I knew there was an organ transplant industry and this horrible kill to order thing happening. I knew there was an elite longevity project, but this moment, I realized, oh my God, of course, they're using the organ. Basically, if we estimate it's about a $9 billion annual industry, 60 to 90,000 transplants per year. That's the scale. So there's a huge financial incentive to keep this going. But imagine if you're a Chinese super elite, basically you have unlimited access to organs forever, as long as you need them until you die, right? And there was actually this obituary that that you're talking about, Rob, it was, again, you get these weird anecdotal things. There was an obituary about, like, I think it was a state level minister, and in the obituary, this is very creepy, but it was written, isn't it incredible how many organs this guy had transplanted to extend his life, right? And like you find this kind of stuff, and it just all made sense at this moment with this hot mic.
Yes, well, the thing about evil, to perpetuate evil, it takes many, many, many people. Like for the Nazis to kill 6 million Jews and countless other homosexuals and gypsies, it took people to be put on trains. It took people to put them onto trains. It took train operators. It took people at the camp guards. It took all this, and it is not too dissimilar in China. And I want you to talk about Annie and her husband, who was a surgeon, and these people that. It requires people to go along with this. And that's why it's so important, and Jan, I'm so grateful for your book, is that we can be able, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here, to shine a light on this, because that's the only way to stop it. So let's talk about what it takes to accomplish this, and who has spoken out about this. Annie is a particular brave, courageous Chinese woman. Can you tell us about her?
Well, it was really interesting because I had heard about this as being like a rumor of sorts, that there's something going on, there's something with organs, maybe they're using Falun Gong practitioners, but I didn't, I'm one of these people, you kind of have to hit me over the head with evidence before I'm like, yeah, I'm just hyper suspicious. It's a little bit, it's actually not ideal in some ways, but I guess good if you're a journalist. So 2 simultaneous things happened at the same time, okay? On the one hand, there was this woman whose pseudonym is Annie. She's still in hiding to this day. She had been having massive problems in her marriage. Her husband was, not sleeping, waking up screaming in the middle of the night, and she was gonna leave. And he confessed to her that he had extracted 2,000 corneas from living people, okay? So that was one, and that there was a camp of people, mainly Falun Gong practitioners, being used for this, okay? At the same time, completely independently in Israel, there was the head of the former head of the Israeli Transplant Association, a professor of surgery at Tel Aviv University named Jacob Levi. He had a patient who, and like I'll never forget him telling me about this on the phone, basically, but he had a patient that told him, I'm tired of waiting. I've got it scheduled in China in 2 weeks. And Jakob, son of Holocaust survivors, just could not believe it, right? Because there's a whole bunch of massive red flags here, right? Except the guy went and got it done and came back with a heart in 2 weeks, right? And you can probably see the red flags, right? Number 1, 2 weeks, right? As we discussed. And number 2, that it's scheduled. If it's scheduled, that means when someone's going to be dead. And there's only one way you can know that. So that was the initial kind of set of evidence. And these 2 amazing researchers named David Kilgore, may he rest in peace, and David Matus, they put together 17 lines of evidence that all pointed in the direction of this kind of an operation happening in zero. They were able to find no evidence of a credible organ transplantation system in China at that time. And we're still in that place today. There's no evidence of a credible organ industry in China of any sort.
Yes, you can go in 2 weeks, we have a perfect match.
And this is, by the way, this is one of the pieces of evidence. Like, they've never actually provided any counter narrative that would in any way be credible or possible even to this, and they just attack the messenger whenever
But that doctor knew
raised.
at that point. There's, someone who works in that field knows that unless you have an inventory, you can't. Can you also tell us a story about, there was sometimes you do a transplant and it doesn't work, and as a matter of fact, that is a complication. And so what do you do when one doesn't work? Can you tell us that story?
Well, this is, one of the most kind of gruesome and disturbing stories is something I actually heard recently. Last year, I was on the panel with a former German explant surgeon. So those are the surgeons that remove the organs, right, to transplant into people from the person that's the donor. And he told me that he's aware of a case that he's documented. I looked at it, where there's a woman from Germany, wealthy woman from Germany, who has a very severe drinking problem and also a particular liver condition which makes cirrhosis happen faster, okay? And this woman basically went and got her transplant in China, right, pretty quickly. But that wasn't enough because that transplant actually had cirrhosis pretty quickly. So she went and did it again, and actually did it 3 times.
She kept drinking.
She kept drinking. And so like there's so much about this that I don't even know what to say. It's a kind of a horror show, but like this type of system lends itself to these sorts of gross excesses. Right, and there's other examples of this kind of nature. There's another example back from 2008. David Kilgore interviewed someone who had 8 different kidneys fitted until the 8th one actually worked. Right, so we only have sort of bits and pieces of information about specific cases.
If this is a horror film that we're making in Hollywood, you go, I don't believe it. It lacks credibility. You don't want to believe it. It's impossible, and yet this is what is happening. The 8 kidneys, I can't imagine. So what we'd like to do is, I'm sure you have some questions that you can, that you're thinking, that you can ask us and Jan something about this happening. We have some microphones that are going to be set up there. We'll turn the lights up for that. So you and I will never be able to go back to China. Let's just say that right now. We're never going to be able to go get Peking duck in Hong Kong ever again.
Which is terrible.
Which is terrible.
They passed a law in the national security law in Hong Kong. I left just before. I was there interviewing some of the key dissidents in this, protest movement. Just before 2019, they put down this national security law. And the law basically is written in such a way that for us doing what we're doing now, very publicly, obviously, right, we could both be put away for 10 or 20 years in Hong Kong.
If we step foot in China.
Yeah, that's.
Now, there's a term that's used that you use in your book, and I want to make sure I get this right. Instrumentalization. Instrumentalization. It's a Chinese term, and I'm making it sound like it's Chinese. But the idea of it is, the inhumanity of it is that human beings can be parts. There's no longer the idea that each individual has a soul and is deserving of dignity by the very nature of being a human being made by our Creator in His image. This is the antithesis of that. This is the absolute perversion of human beings as God's creatures. That instrumentalization, the idea that we're just used as parts, this is something that is, we cannot allow this to continue. And that is something that is, it is happening now. So what is the latest that you know about this, and how is, what can be done about it as far as, here's some of the questions that were given. How did the organ harvesting industry start in China? How far back does it go? Have you met anyone who has gotten an organ through this network?
Well, so let's just talk about the instrumentalization for just 1 sec, okay? Because we're talking about bodies, right? Human beings being used as just material for profit and elite longevity, right? The 2/3 of the book, in fact, right, is actually about how this industry is a lens into understanding how communist China actually works, right? And this instrumentalization is the perfect word for explaining literally how they treat anything, how they treat people, bodies, how they treat trade partners, right? How they treat allies, right? I've been thinking about Iran a lot lately, right? And how, of course, Iran had its own agendas, but it's very obvious that the Chinese Communist Party instrumentalized Iran in a whole lot of ways.
I'd like to thank all the Hollywood actors who stood up for the Iranian women last night. 0 of them. Not one comment supporting Iranian women being brutalized, murdered, beaten, raped by the brutal mullahs in Egypt, from Egypt, that have hijacked that country. Not one Hollywood starlet said anything last night about that, including Javier Bardem. Sorry.
No, and so, but this instrumentalization is critical to understand. In a way, that's the punchline, but I kind of try to explain it through all sorts of different angles, because I feel like our foreign policy establishment doesn't fully yet grasp this. We're way closer, and I think, you know, there's certainly people who do exactly grasp it, but I think this is just a very important, it's hard to conceive such extreme coldness, okay? But so in answer to the question now, how did it really grow? So there was a low level of this organ industry prior to the year 2000. So the Falun Gong persecution begins 1999. The transplant industry starts growing geometrically and kind of plateaus about 2005. I think Ethan Gutman testified there were 146 hospitals. He's testifying in 2016, but we're looking at data up around 2010, I believe, or something like that, but that are doing, you know, basically transplants daily.
And
Today that number is 200, by the way. So this is like we have less and less information to deal with, but we know the number of hospitals that are doing transplants.
Wow.
And the other part.
How many a year is this happening?
So it's 60 to 90. I mean, so Ethan and I would argue about this, but he says 60 to 100,000. I think that's completely fair. I say 60 to 90 because it doesn't sound.
We lost 55,000 people in Vietnam. There's 60,000 minimum a year are being murdered on demand.
Well, I would say the whole error bars on this, right? 60 to 90 or 60 to 100. That's the whole thing is a conservative estimate. So it's basically estimating that there's only one a day in every transplant hospital, and it's almost certainly a lot more. And there's some that do 5,000 over the course of a year.
Now, can you tell us about the survivor?
So, unbelievably, I never thought we'd ever see one, but Chung Pei-ming is a man who is missing part of his liver and part of his lung out of a Chinese hospital and lived to tell the tale. And this was, you know, I think he came out 2 or 3 years ago, terrible sense of the passage of time, but there's a huge uptick in interest at this point because he was the smoking gun evidence. It's very hard, as you can imagine, to have smoking gun evidence. Like let me mention this one thing, because this is incredibly important.
Because
the transplant, he got cut in the early 2000s, actually.
Yeah. Because there's a difference now, I believe, according to your book, if we can believe it, according to your book, I think there's a different brutal thing that's happening now as opposed to how lucky he was by 2005 that he survived it. There's another, they keep increasing the brutality, and the proficiency is now to the point where they have an ability to just kill them right there while the other person is waiting for the recipient of that organ.
Well, the real tragedy, right, is they built this thing over 15 years on the backs of the Falun Gong, right? And then in 2014, 2015, no one really did much about it. There were some resolutions, but nothing with teeth, no real international outcry. This is the problem with these atrocity type situations. They spread, and so they added the Uyghurs, okay? Very isolated group, northwest of China, Xinjiang province. The whole thing is run like a police state, okay? It's almost like a prison in itself. They dehumanized them, they added 1 million of them into the incarceration system, and they started working on them. And just as a little addition to this, right, I just had on my show American Thought Leaders, who some of you may be familiar with. I just had Pastor Bob Fu, who runs China Aid. It's a very important organization that supports Christians in China, basically underground house church Christians mainly, also underground Catholics. And I've noticed there's been an uptick in this dehumanizing rhetoric against Christians. I noticed it anecdotally, so I asked him on the show, hey, are you seeing this, right? This is what I think I'm seeing. He said, absolutely.
Christians
right?
are next.
I'm not as quick to say that for sure, but I do know that the dehumanizing rhetoric precedes atrocity.
And that's what's happening now. So, yes, and they're going to run out. As a matter of fact, you know, when you go those kind of numbers, they're going to continue, and they're going to need another group of people to dehumanize first, and then to instrumentalization. Okay, so some of these questions are
You asked earlier about what to do, though.
Yeah, what can we do? But here's one. Who are the customers of this? Who are these 60,000 people that are going in? Where are they from?
So it's a whole mix. Actually, I was briefing ONDCP today on this. I got asked this exact question. We don't have an exact grasp of the numbers from different places, but what it looks like is it's kind of like rings, almost like spheres of influence or something, because the closest, of course, the super elites and other Chinese that have that wealth, right, and they're right there, have the primary access. There's been a lot of South Koreans that have gone because there was actually a film crew that got really good evidence. They took in undercover cameras. It's an amazing documentary that they got a whole bunch of evidence a few years back around this. So specifically because they knew it was a thing to go to China. So it's around there. Taiwan was big, but then also Germany, European countries, American countries. That's just, I think that's less, but still quite significant. And again, with organ transplantation, supply is always, always, always a lot lower than the demand. So this preys on basically people's desperation, right? And you don't really want to know where it's coming from. I kind of opened the book with someone who is just desperate, has a family, and the China option comes up and she doesn't fully understand what she's getting into at first.
Now, can we talk about cynical theories just for a second to kind of understand the mindset of communism? Now, cynical theories by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, and I believe our friend Peter Boghossian was involved in these. It kind of understands the potential or how you get to dehumanizing people and how these people are not, to treat them not as human beings anymore.
Well, so this is if you're interested in what some people describe as American communism, right? These critical theories, critical race theory, for example, being the best known one. James and Helen Pluckrose, they wrote this book called Cynical Theories, and I wonder, why is it called Cynical Theories, right? Of course, they explain that. It's because part of these critical theories are kind of a fusion of communism and postmodernism, but that they set up every human relationship as an oppressor-oppressed relationship. And it's always, you're kind of angling in the imagination of these various critical theories. The only real interaction human beings have with each other, and by the way, this is communism as well, right? Is that, I'm either if I'm the oppressed person, I'm thinking about how to seize back my power that you have taken from me. And if I'm the oppressor, I'm of course trying to prevent you from doing that and keep oppressing you, because that's the system. And so that's human interaction. There's no love, there's no connection to God, there's none of these things about all of that stuff, all of that nice sounding, warm, cushy stuff is actually all a tool of oppression. Right? And the person who's oppressed needs to achieve critical consciousness and overcome that.
It's grievance and envy.
It's and I think actually this is something I write about quite a lot in Kill to Order. That in a way, right? It's like instrumentalization of grievance and envy to basically achieve the glorious revolution, and then you take power, and then the theory doesn't matter as much anymore the moment you have power, right? Because you can exercise it.
Well, now, as far as what we can do about this, I mean, Jan is already, it's an incredible success to have written this book, and the courage that you took to do that, and to put yourself out there in this. However, there is now the beginnings of legislation in the United States. And can you tell us about that?
Sure, and so I actually have an appendix. People are asked often, like, what can we do, right? I try to cover the range. If you're, somewhere in here, I believe there is an incoming Rotary Club president. Okay, excellent, there you are. Okay, get this, okay, Rotary Club, what they did, this is an amazing service organization. I used to run international youth programs. Yeah. I would always go to Rotary Clubs and get help from them, okay, wherever the small community I would work. They've created a satellite Rotary Club specifically committed to ending forced organ harvesting in China.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's Rotary Club, okay? Yeah. And so for people that are just, working at a local level, you can actually get involved and get movie screenings up. This is one of these issues where raising the awareness around it, like 100 calls to a senator's office actually makes a difference for that issue. And and I'll explain why I'm talking about.
Too.
Yeah, it's the most nonpartisan issue you could, possibly imagine.
Let's not murder groups of people. I don't think the Democrats or Republicans will have a problem with that.
Yeah. And all the way up, right? All the way from Rotary Club, if you're not personally, sort of super active, you can connect with the Rotary Club, do that. Very easy to join. I'm a new Rotarian, by the way, because of this. Yeah. And at the federal level, there's actually 3 pieces of legislation in Congress right now. 2 have passed the House unanimously, almost unanimously, 1 dissent across the 2, and a 3rd one's in committee. And one actually just got bipartisan support. It got rebranded as the Falun Gong and Victims of Forced Organ Harvesting Protection Act.
Yeah.
And it just does something very simple. It sanctions people that are involved in this. It asks for reporting about it. A previous version, I'm not 100% sure if this is in this final version, this new bill, but it was also asking the question, is this an atrocity under the Elie Wiesel Act? We'd have like official clarification of whether it is. That's actually useful for people that are working on human rights.
Elie Wiesel of the Holocaust.
That's right. And these things make a difference because a lot of those Chinese leaders have exit strategies to America. The economy over there is not doing too well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about what Xi Jinping is doing right now.
And they could be murdered at any minute. So at some point they're going to want to have an escape.
And so
they're
they
gonna
may
be
stop.
susceptible to this.
And but the point is they may actually stop being involved, right? Because they want to keep that open. If they get sanctioned, they actually won't be able to come to the US. So anyway, there's that tool. There's state level legislation. 6 out of 50 states now have state level legislation that basically prevents Medicare and Medicaid insurance from paying for China transplants, which are great. Like we should do all 50 states, right? So there's just so much that can be done. And at the administration level, this is the part that pains me the most, okay? Because we actually train, not the administration, but we train Chinese transplant doctors, surgeons. We provide materials, we provide funding. There's NIH funding. There were letters to Harvard about questions about that from the select committee.
The Chinese could not have done this unless their doctors were trained and unless they had these anti-rejection drugs, which are not made in China or made here.
Yeah,
So if we did have a legislation in place that preventing the training of these doctors and preventing these rejection drugs, anti-rejection drugs for these organs, then they wouldn't be able to, it would be exposed and it would start to put a stop to this.
But they can, that's not a hard thing to do. That's even it could be done with an executive order, it could be done, there's a whole lot of ways you could basically put a stop to that, stop the NIH funding. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, NIH director, we actually talked about this recently, his new kind of, trying to make the funding more transparent and more accountability to NIH would actually prevent a lot of this from happening. So the point is there's something starting here. And most importantly, I feel like the collective, you talked about COVID at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I think that COVID, that time, watching people in China being welded into their homes, and frankly, some of our own kind of totalitarian impulse being exposed. I think that has changed our collective consciousness. We're a bit wiser. And when I talk to people these days, most people are ready to believe it. When I started 20 years ago, it was really hard to talk to people about this. People would kind of escape
I would like to
mentally.
thank Gavin Newsom for helping educate people on tyranny and please mask between bites. That woke up a few people. Let's just throw the food to grandma in the garage. Let's not bring her in for Thanksgiving dinner. I think that, the fact that they closed churches and kept open strip clubs and weed stores, I think it woke people up to the potentiality of what our government can do terrible and could do bad things. This is an unbelievable, another level to it. And China particularly is such an incredible culture for thousands of years. The wisdom that has come out of that culture. The fact that when the Buddhists were killed in India and they escaped to go to China and Tibet and through China, they reformed Buddhism. And the idea that to not be a Buddhist out separate from the world, be in the world, is an incredible gift to world culture and to philosophy. These are people that need and deserve to be protected. And the Falun Gong particularly is a beautiful culture. And the beauty of their foundational belief system makes them exceptionally vulnerable to this particular form of brutality. When they are asked, can you tell that story?
Oh, I mean, you know, we were just talking about this, like the way they would, you know, arrest Falun Gong practitioners in the early days was they would just ask, right? Truthfulness is the first principle. So people, you know, I'm not saying that Falun Gong practitioners never lie, but it's like, you know, when you meet your maker, you're going to be judged on how honest you were, obviously, right? It's a core principle. So people were asked, and they just, are you Falun Gong? Yes, in the truck, right? Like that's kind of how it played out. I think there was a teaching actually given by Li Hongzhi, the founder. I think it was something to the tune of, you don't need to answer the question. You know, you can kind of, you know, I don't remember how exactly the idea. The point was that these people were actually kind of pillars of society in most of the communities that they were. And that's why this dehumanization aspect was so critical, because they had to, like, how do you get, you know, Chinese to turn on these people? And part of it is that the communists have become experts at doing this. You kind of target a group of people and you want to make sure they're radioactive, right? So everybody tries to, you know, avoid becoming that or avoid being associated with it in any way because, well, you know, there's going to be hell to pay. And every family has lost people. Like, it's all in the history of every Chinese family. This is like the biggest, you know, mass murdering regime in the history of the world, right?
It's ironic that communism is Western. It's an import. Communism is coming from the West, and yet it's become the most useful tool for totalitarianism and this draconian brutality that the Chinese employ. It's so, to me, growing up in San Francisco and seeing Tai Chi and seeing the daily, you know, and being exposed through to Buddhism in San Francisco is the beautiful thing that the godly idea of the respect between fellow human beings that the Chinese employ, which is praying to the God inside of you. And I pray to honor the God in you, and you pray to honor the God in me. It's beautiful. And that for that misuse to be done and to be these beautiful human beings, to be thought of as just parts, is something that when you know it, you can't unknow it. And then, well, God calls upon us to do something about it. This is a great injustice that's happening to our fellow human beings. And it'll keep happening unless people step up and participate and say no to this brutality. And each person in this room is the next leader in this movement. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming. Now, do you have any questions? Because we have some microphones set up here. Because we have Jan, and I won't be able to answer any of them because I don't know a lot about this. But Jan will be able to help. So Jan, do you have any questions? We can turn on the mic.
And while you come up, okay, there's mics over there. There should be someone kind of waving you over. I can't see the mics. You could probably see them. But there's one really wonderful kind of uplifting thing I want to share with you. I talk about it a little bit towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
At this time, at this moment that we're sitting here today, there are literally millions of people, okay, going out and talking to their fellow man one by one, maybe with a little flyer, maybe with a DVD, maybe with a VCD, maybe just talking. And what they do is, right, they say, hey, you know the history of this country, and you know what the Chinese Communist Party has done to your family, because every family has had problems. And I don't know exactly what they say, but they basically are getting people to quit the Chinese Communist Party. Okay?
That's amazing.
And it's kind of various institutions like the Youth League, because almost everybody in China is inaugurated into one of these groups, the Youth League Young Pioneers, and it's sort of like this kind of spiritual cleansing. It's an opportunity to put this thing behind you.
Let's get some of these questions because we only have so much time here. Yes, over here, please.
Sure. Kristen Honey, and thank you both for your courage. In a complex issue like this, a lot of people will not want to see. So if there's a takeaway message, what's the one thing you would ask federal government to do that we can do on our domestic side? And what's the one thing that you would ask every citizen to do here that each one of us, no matter where we sit in this country, could do to change things today? Thank you.
Okay, so I think getting this Falun Gong Protection Act passed, this new bill, I think it's a no-brainer. It's bipartisan now. I think, calling your senator and asking them to do that would be an amazing thing.
That'd be
I think.
beautiful, yeah.
But also, if you, let's say theoretically, happen to work for HHS and have access to data or something like that at HHS, you could help try to figure out, how are we funding Chinese transplant hospitals? How are we involved in the system? All the different routes, right? All the financial and research relationships, because that would actually provide a blueprint to be able to figure out how to stop them, how to cut them off. Because to me, that's a no-brainer.
If anybody in this room knows Donald Trump, he's going to be seeing Xi Jinping, and if you can say, hey, how about stop murdering your own people for their organs, I think that'll be a long way. Unfortunately, I don't know if he'll say that, but it'd be nice if somebody in the administration did. Yes, thank you.
Thank you both. From a behavioral sciences perspective, I'm just really interested in the difference between our population and what's going on over there. And this is not meant to be a geopolitical statement, but we watch munitions being dropped on speedboats and are looking at FPV videos like they're video games, even though what's going on in Iran. And there's these these TikTok videos on the White House website that really kind of gamifies destruction, right, irrespective of geopolitical realities. It's just curious, over there, is it socially perceived, we hear about, ultra high net worth individuals, eating endocrine systems of babies, and it's a conspiracy theory, and that's what the Chinese population is thinking about this organ trade, or are they very aware that it's very much a reality and are just too terrified to speak up against it?
Truthfully, we don't know the answer to how the knowledge that it is, how widespread it is, and the complicity of that country, because they're not an open country, whereas we are here. And I think all human beings are required of dignity, and we have to look at each case, and whether it's a Venezuelan drug trafficker or somebody in the boat, I mean, that is also something that is horrific, and we have to be, at this country, we have to make sure that we don't, in ourselves, compartmentalize the deaths of any human beings. Now, while it is the Iranian regime, if I can just speak about to that, is a horrendous, murderous group that has hijacked that country. At the same time, we have to be cognizant, and we must not act in the same way, otherwise we can become what we loathe. And we have to be very cognizant about that. And I agree with you, I do not like that any deaths of any human beings glorified and to be making light of any of it. And I think that's repulsive.
And just to follow up on that, I think you were also asking, what do Chinese think about it? And so, the only people that have access to this are the super elites, right? This is a very top level thing. And throughout, it's actually used as a threat in the prisons and this old massive incarceration system. They'll say, look, you better be good or we're going to take your organs. But it's sort of known as a rumor of sorts, and especially among the lower 40%, people that are way below poverty line, right? In China, it's hard to imagine how much poverty, almost half the country lives in over there. They're, for them, it's just purely abstract, right? They maybe wonder if they could, it's basically like this kind of rumor or...
If I can add to that, when you are worried about your own survival and you're worried about how you're going to make, how I'm going to get in trouble, am I going to get whatever, the idea of some industrialized brutality and murder is a luxury that they're not provided. And that's my interpretation of it. Can we have the next question?
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jan. Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow with the Independent Medical Alliance. I'll start by saying you said you have an appendix. I'm glad you haven't been explanted. I had to throw my joke in.
No, that was good. That was good.
My question is, there's so many parallels here in the American health system, and you've covered so many of these, but how do we address the human condition of life and humanity as commodity? And philosophically, from either one of you, just the value of life in and of itself.
Well, thank you. I mean, there's an interesting thing that's happening now with the Trump administration, and I am a big fan of this administration. However, you cannot treat everything as a business, and the idea that somehow we are now, this administration is giving Bayer protection. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, whether they're going to get liability protection for a known cancer-causing drug, cancer-causing agent that they are polluting our food supply with, glyphosate.
I just gave a lecture on that in North Carolina 2 days ago.
How can we be okay with that? And the thing is, unless people enough stand up, we are in a free country. We are free. However, we have to know that you can't have captured agencies. We have to be aware of it, and we have to do something about it. And by speaking up our voice, and this particular administration, I'm grateful for it because they have some tremendous people in it, but it's still vulnerable to big business. It's still vulnerable to people, for Bayer to come in and say, we're doing this, and to get the president on board with it. And I'm sorry to say, I'm very much angry about that, but we have to focus on what we can do, and I want to make sure that eventually gets overturned, and we have to do that through the legislation, but we don't have legislators that want to legislate, to be honest with you.
So a huge theme in the book is the distinction, or perhaps the spectrum, on one end of Hippocratic medicine, which Ryan Cole, you're very aware of course. So that Hippocratic medicine means you're doing the best you can for your individual patient, you're understanding the totality of the problem, you're trying to minimize the intervention, minimize the harm with the intervention, and then the medicine is the sort of emergent property of all of these doctors practicing, right?
Yes.
The other side of it is something called utilitarian bioethics, okay? And that's the greatest good for the greatest number. And the very short answer to the question is, why is that a problem, is that someone gets to define what that is. And by the way, in communist societies, the greatest good is the survival and supremacy of the Communist Party, okay?
Yeah.
So now here's the problem, that we've been drifting from Hippocratic medicine towards this other extreme, which is, have you heard this quote? In order to make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs. That's the epitome, that's Stalin, by the way, that's the epitome of utilitarian bioethics.
Our food system is poison. We're poisoning our children. Cisco provides garbage poisons to our children. This is happening. Get involved. I am involved in the schools where I live in I'm a California refugee, so I live in Arizona now. We're getting involved. Let's get why can't we get, farmers to bring fresh food here? And we have there's 4 butchers. All your meat comes from the same place. You can have a hamburger that has the DNA of 1,000 different cows in it, because there's only 4 massive butchering places in America. And they're all owned by, 85% of it's owned by BlackRock. And that's a fact.
Thank you both for being amazing truth tellers. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's have the next question.
Hi, Joel Thayer. So first, big shout out to the Rotary Club. I myself was a recipient in high school of the Rotary Youth Leadership Award, so thank you very much for that honor. But in terms of, I have a question somewhat similar on the more political strategy question. It's a more political strategy question, rather. Specifically, you mentioned that there is a bipartisan effort in order to move this along. One of my main concerns with some of the legislation that we're seeing is that there's this weird opposition from more of the corporate end of the spectrum, something that, Rob, you just spoke to. Do you see any pushback, at least, one of my concerns on this issue in particular is the seemingly odd collusion that you see between some of the pharmaceutical companies and also the insurance companies mixed with the universities themselves to add an insane lobby.
It's not so odd. It makes perfect sense for them. And it makes perfect sense for us to fight against it. It is capitalism that has has helped capture the CAP part, capture agencies and government. However, we need to just oppose it. Now, my friend Robert Kennedy, our friend Robert Kennedy, and he's like, we can't get these companies any legislation passed right now, so we have to cajole them. I'll translate what he's saying. We can't get any legislation passed. We can't get 60 votes. What we can do is cajole these companies into doing the right thing and give them enough time to do it. And they are susceptible to cajoling because we do still have a free society. However, it is, it can be captured. You have BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. They own Bank of America. Bank of America owns BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. You have 85% of the entire, all the, let's be honest, the tech companies are owned by these companies. Yep. So they can and they do exert power. But we are here tonight. We are able to talk tonight because we still live in the freest, greatest experiment in the history of the world, the United States of America. So let's keep working on it. Yes, your question? Because we're going to try, we only got about 6 more minutes.
Have you heard the first NIH Scientific Freedom lecture is this Friday? And the scientists are already criticizing the speaker because he's talking about the origins of COVID. Why do most scientists defer to China on or the CCP on the COVID laboratory?
They're ideologically captured. And it's tough, because what happens is, if you don't believe in God, then you have to find a God. And the thing is, when science and religion had to separate during the Age of Enlightenment, because the Pope had decided that Galileo and Copernicus couldn't be right, because the Earth, as everyone knows, has to be the center of the universe. So at that point, this is a very long discussion, but I'll give you the 2-second version of it, is science had to evolve separately to survive, because theology was killing it. And so instead of you had the laws of nature, and they just took out the lawgiver out of it, but there's still laws. So there is still a religious architecture in the thinking of science, and that foundational thinking is tough. The toughest thing to give up is the belief system, the foundational belief system, and they are stuck there. And it doesn't have to, even if there's evidence to the contrary, they're going to stay there, because there's a religious architecture in the way that they process their thinking.
Just a quick quote, right? One of the lessons of COVID for me, or big lessons of COVID for me, was that propaganda works for some people. Okay, and I think that there was, as insane as it was to suggest that COVID had a natural origin, it's just very obvious from the beginning that a lab origin was by orders of magnitude, by far the more obvious sort of scenario, right? But that they just pushed it so hard that some people have been pushed over the edge, I think. And this is actually a deep problem I see in our society. You could also imagine how powerful propaganda is in a place like communist China, right? Where there is no other voice, right? That's allowed. It's all under the cover of darkness, and on the peril of your life to share.
People who were able and were willing to see things now are, and the people who were willing to not be. You still see people wearing masks at the airport. Some people aren't going to stop that. They're stuck. And the only way to get them through that is going to be with love. You're going to have to, in a loving way. But there are people, and I would say to answer that question, there are people that stuck with Hitler in the bunker until literally the collapse of everything. They stayed in it because they could not open their mind to the possibility that he was wrong. Yes.
My name's Michael. I'm from San Diego, Rob. We live in Coronado currently. I'm out here just visiting, and this is the first I've heard about this topic. But the first thing I want to say is it's awesome to see you. I want to say thank you for being out there for good,
thank you,
for honesty, for love.
Let's give Rob a hand for this. Yeah. No, I mean seriously.
No, I know, it takes a lot. I mean, all your buddies in Hollywood, I'm sure, looking at you differently, or at least what we hear from all of them. And I'm sure you don't have a ton of support from there, but you have a ton of support from here.
Well, God bless you. Thank you.
So
I would say one of the things I wanted to close on was the idea of the limited amount of time we get here, and to not be judgmental, but to appeal to our higher nature. And that's what I learned from Buddhism. And I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. It's Christ's original church. It's branched out, but the original one, the OG, Catholicism works. We have to appeal to our higher nature, and I learned that from Buddhism. Is that there's levels that you can, the lowest level of it, there's basically 8 levels of spiritual growth, and the lowest, basically you break it down to 4.
Even more.
Yes.
Even more levels. They just keep going.
But the idea of it, the bottom one is this criminal, someone who doesn't, a drug addict behavior, somebody who can't say no, a very adolescent, childlike behavior. It cannot say no to immediate gratification. And then if you can escape from that, then the second level is this absolute strict form of living your life, of fundamentalism, because you're afraid you go back into that other one. And then if you were raised into that fundamentalism kind of idea, whether it's Christian or whatever fundamentalist thought, you question it. And then when you're a questioner and you're a searcher trying to find out meaning, trying to find out what is this about, what is my place in all of this? And if you can get through that, and through that search, you can get to that mystical part where you accept that you are part of the whole thing, and the whole thing is part of you, and that there is no difference between you and that stream and that mountain. And through further study, you realize there is a difference, and then through further study, you realize there isn't. But through this search, it is only the beginning. And that is a beautiful thing that's why I love the Chinese so much for that. And it brings me back to Christianity, to like when we face our Maker. And this is the final question I wanted to ask Jan.
I had one more thing. Jan was very interested. First of all, I'm 40 years in July. I'll be 40 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I was very curious about what you said about healing yourself early on in this. We have a family member who's suffering from painful stuff, and I'm really curious about that. Thank you guys.
Where are you based?
San Diego.
Yeah, we know people in San Diego. We'll connect you.
The self-forgiveness, and to realize and that there's a connection. And the beautiful thing about the word grace is I can't get there on my own. Grace, the grace of Jesus Christ, is what can help me get there. And it's through grace. It's not through my words. It's not through my actions. It's through nothing I could do, but someone who laid down his life for me. And only through that grace can we get there. But through that grace, it does require us to fight against evil. It does. We must stand up against it in all its forms. And believe me, the devil, if he exists, he's saying this: don't make waves. Just go along with everything. Why are you wasting your time? Why risk yourself? Just go along with it. And we must make waves, because this is the beacon of strength, the beacon of freedom throughout the world, the United States of America. If they can take us down, if Satan in all his forms can take down the United States of America, whether it's through communism, whether it's through another religion that murders people, whatever it is, they will try to take this country down. And this is why we are a strong nation, and the nation is waking up now. And that's why we must stand up for all forms and all peoples and all intolerance all over the world. And that's what we're doing, and that's why I'm honored to be here with you, Jan. It's one of I asked God, I said, what do you want me to do, God? I'll do whatever. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting next to Jan talking about kill to order, human harvest. I wanted to ask this question because what do you say to that person who's dying and who's desperate, and they do not have a chance to wait? What do you say to that person? How do we be kindly Christian in this painful situation that this person finds himself? What do you say to that person?
Well, I think you and I both believe that deeply that we will be forced to meet our Maker one day. We will meet our Maker one day, not forced. It's just going to happen, and we're accountable for what we've done.
You can say forced. I think it will.
So I think if the person is of that sort, but also it's sort of, you have to think, what are you going to tell your kids about how you chose to live your life? If you're going to allow for someone to be murdered for you to live, what lesson are you teaching your children? I think it would be a most terrible lesson.
Much better to live your life, a short life, with dignity and respect for all human beings, than to extend it by some form of brutality and cruelty. And facing your Maker at that point, your Lord, that will not be a very fruitful meeting if you go against your conscience. And all we ask is that we live up to these great ideals from this incredible experiment in freedom that this nation was able to give us. The freedoms that we have here are unique, and it is worth fighting for. And I just remember, when COVID tyranny stopped and we were able to do this revenge traveling, which everybody was traveling, and you wanted to just go somewhere. And thankfully, I was able to take my kids to Italy, and we stopped at the American cemetery for service members outside Rome, and I made my kids go to every grave, as many as they could. And I go, go, now this guy's 26. He was a private, he was a lieutenant. This guy was a private 19. This guy here who's laid to rest in another country. This guy was 30. He was a sergeant. And he said all these people, what Lincoln described as gave the last full measure of devotion for our nation, for our freedom. It is important that we remember that. And what it takes, whatever it costs us, if it costs me never making another movie again, so what? But if we can each stand up, and what Charlie Kirk said to me, let us all be 1% more courageous a year. Have one more conversation. Have one more phone call to your senator. Read one more book and educate yourself and give it to your friends. If we can do that, then we have fulfilled our duty to this great nation to continue its freedom and its unique liberties as an example for all mankind. So I will thank you so much for this evening. I appreciate it. God bless you all.
Thank you.
And Jan Jekielek, this man is such an incredible journalist that he had put together and allowed himself to open his mind, to allow himself to open something that he didn't want to believe. But through your journey to be able to open up and now to have legislation in the United States, thanks to you. So God bless you, Jan. You have done incredible work.
Thank you. Thanks to a whole lot of really amazing people who are all actually who I write about in this book as well. It's not a large group, but they gave their lives to their time and their effort and their hearts to exposing this issue. And it's, as you can see, this is something that if we don't deal with it, it spreads. And I'd really liked us to put a major dent in it and at least end our own complicity in it. And I think that's doable in the short term.
We'll do it. And I also thank everyone who works here at the Jill and Joe Biden Center for the Performing Arts. I want to thank you for your heart to come here and to let us to go over tonight. And I want to thank the people who were able to provide this. And thank each and every one of you. I think we'll all walk out a little differently than we came in. That's my hope. That's my prayer. And thank you. God bless each and every one of you. And let's go on with our lives here in a slightly different and better way. Thank you so much for this evening.
So let me tell it to you straight up. This book, 20 years in the making, I feel like this moment is where all the roads have been leading to. I really want your help to make this book a bestseller, to blow it out of the water, basically get it on all the lists, the New York Times list, the Amazon list. I mean, if we can do that, millions more people will understand that this crime against humanity is real, and we can end it. We can actually at least end America's complicity in it and the West's complicity in it, but we can actually save some lives this way. So please join me, killtoorder.com, get the book, spread the word, and together I really think we can make a difference.